Hi, this is Professor Brandy Stanley back, and we are continuing now with our therapeutic interaction. If you will remember, at this point in the interaction, the patient had just revealed to the nurse that she had a previous job loss and had to spend some time in prison due to a DUI that caused a job loss. She also expressed for the second time in our interaction embarrassment over what occurred and why she is here to seek treatment.
Yeah, I know that you're embarrassed to be here, and I know that, some things in your past are very embarrassing to you right now, but I just want to reassure you that you've done a really good thing seeking out treatment. And I know that there have been times in your past where you've probably felt some stress. What kind of things have worked for you in the past to help you to deal with those stressors that you've experienced?
Because our patient has twice expressed the embarrassment that she has about being here and about the fact that she had to spend some time in prison, it is important for the nurse at this point to acknowledge the embarrassment. She uses the therapeutic communication technique of acknowledging, which is expressing recognition of the feelings of embarrassment that the patient has and validating its existence in this way. She goes on to do something that could be argued as non-therapeutic because she says to the patient, "It is a really good thing that you have sought treatment." Although in many instances this would be a non-therapeutic remark because it would be giving approval, in this instance the patient obviously needs some affirmation of the fact that she is here because of the embarrassment that she is feeling. So by doing this, the nurse positively acknowledges the patient, affirming her for going ahead and seeking treatment in the face of the embarrassment that she is feeling. Next, the nurse uses the therapeutic communication technique of directing in order to move the conversation in a certain direction. She wants to discuss with the patient now coping skills that have worked in the past to help to relieve stress so that the nurse can build upon those during the treatment process. Remember, when we look at the title model of mental health recovery, we see the patient story as primary in the nurse-patient interaction. As the story unfolds, the fourth step of the title model is to use that available toolkit. In this case, the story contains examples of what has worked for her in the past and beliefs about what might work for her in the future. And these are going to represent the main tools that need to be used to build that story of recovery for this individual patient. In that way, we are practicing patient-centered care, really making the patient's strengths and the patient problems as the focus of our care.
Well, I used to like to run when I was feeling stressed, and I have a cricket that I like to craft on. That really relaxes me.
Well, those are some really good coping skills. That's what we call them. Our name for stress copers, we call them coping skills. And so one of the things that we're going to do while you're here is to hopefully work on those a little bit and kind of help to reduce your stress through learning to use some new ones and building upon the old ones.
Again, we see the nurse use acknowledging by recognizing that there are some skills that have worked for the patient in the past, and she affirms those skills by positively acknowledging that the patient already has some good skills that are existing. Then she uses this time to give some information about what they're going to work on in treatment in order to build those skills and reinforce ones that are already there.
What would you like to set as your number one priority for treatment? What would be your goals of being here?
Well, I guess I'd like to feel better. Not stressed and anxious all the time.
Right.
Then I can work on things with my husband. He would quit drinking and being angry.
Okay.
Once again, we see the nurse using patient-centered care as she asks the patient, what would be your goals for treatment?
So I'll just kind of let you know how it goes here, some of the things that we might do to help get to that goal if the interventions are acceptable to you. First of all, the doctors already prescribed some medications to kind of take the anxiety down. And while the medications do help, they are not going to be something that's going to be our only course of treatment. There's a lot more that we need to work on too, right? Mm-hmm. So what we're going to do is we're going to have some group therapy and some individual therapy every day with our therapist to help strengthen those coping skills that are already there, and then to also work to develop some new ones. And then finally, we can set up a family therapy after discharge and here on the unit with you and your husband to start working on that relationship.
The nurse continues to use the therapeutic communication technique of giving information to talk to the patient about how treatment will progress. She acknowledges to the patient that even though medication has been prescribed and will help, it is not the only course of therapy that will be important in the treatment process. At that point, she goes on to explain that group and individual therapy will be used to help to develop new coping skills and to strengthen the ones that are already there. In addition, she talks about family therapy with the husband being a possibility to work on something that the patient has identified as a real problem in her life and a source of much stress.
But unfortunately, because we can't control him, while we can maybe steer him in the right direction, we can't stop his drinking because, we don't have control over that. So we're going to work on everything we can do to strengthen your marriage, and hopefully maybe he'll decide to do that for himself. How does that sound?
Good.
Throughout this part of the interaction, the nurse has also used the therapeutic communication technique of planning, where she has assisted the patient to identify the goals for the future and to sequence activities in order to accomplish those goals. In this part of the interaction, the nurse goes ahead and sets a realistic limit on what can be expected from the patient's husband. While they can do therapy with the patient and husband, and they can work on the patient relationship with her husband, they cannot force the husband to quit drinking, as this is outside both the patient's and the treatment team's control and must be a personal decision.
Okay, well, I am your nurse here again. I'll be here throughout the remainder of the day. So if you need anything, I want you to come and see me, and if there's anything I can do to make your stay better. And what we'll do is we'll carve out some time this afternoon to kind of see where you are and spend some time talking about things that are going on. Does that sound okay?
Yep, thanks.
All right, thank you very much.
The nurse ends the interaction with an offering of self as she tells the patient that she's going to be available and willing to speak with the patient throughout the remainder of the shift and to carve out some time in the afternoon to be able to have a one-on-one interaction with the patient. By doing this, she offers herself to the patient and uses herself as a therapeutic tool. Throughout this interaction, the nurse has really expressed a lot of the values that are in the 10 commitments of the title model of mental health recovery. When she begins by asking the patient to tell their story, she recognizes that many times the patient's story is translated into a third-person professional account by different health or social care providers, and their view of the story or the patient history may not be the same as the patient's story. In this way, the nurse has valued the voice by asking the person to tell their story, realizing that their story represents the beginning and end point of the helping encounter and embraces not only an account of their distress, but also their hope for its resolution. Remember that the voice of the patient is the voice of experience, and as the third commitment of the title model of mental health recovery tells us, the nurse becomes an apprentice to the patient, as the person who is telling the story is telling their own life story on which they are the expert. While we learn something from the power of their story, we only learn this if we allow them to tell it and treat them with dignity and respect throughout the interaction. We need to learn from the person what needs to be done rather than leading that person in the direction of what needs to be done. The nurse has also made use of the patient's already available toolkit and suggested ways in which she can help the patient to craft a step beyond, which is to focus on developing new skills that need to be done and revealing the power of change and potentially pointing them toward the ultimate goal of recovery. She's offered the gift of time, which is the sixth title commitment, and she's had a genuine curiosity for what is the patient's story is going to be. While many facilities throughout the world have implemented the title model in its entirety, even if we are not fully implementing the title model, we can certainly use its principles in every interaction that we come to with our patients. And remember that patient-centered care is always a better model because we are going to increase the adherence of the patient post-discharge and help them meet their goals for treatment rather than our superimposed goals on the patient. By doing this, we recognize the patient autonomy as a person who is capable of making their own decisions and doing what is best for them. Thank you for taking the time to listen. This has been Professor Brandy Stanley talking about therapeutic communication.